Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to our Kyle Seraphin Show Locals call-in special we do on Thursdays. It is Thursday. It feels early for Thursday. It also feels like this week has been forever. The moving situation, when there's like never a day when you get to just take off and not do stuff, it's kind of grating. You guys kind of know what I'm talking about. All right. We want to talk about what you want to talk about. If you're part of the Locals chat, here, let's go ahead and just plug it right now. It's kyleseraphin.com. If you want to join us over on Locals, you have to be a subscriber to get the phone number to call in. It's kind of a little benefit we do. Anybody can listen in. You guys can all be part of the conversation in the chat. That's cool. We don't mind. But this program has no additional sponsorships, specifically because the phone number is available to our subscribers. The phone number is on X. If you are watching on X and you want to be an X subscriber, I think it's like $1.99 a month. It's not a significant amount. You get the early access to our interviews, which we do on a weekly basis. You also get to call in and just own this show for as long as we feel like it. And unless people are pushing the envelope, we'll just talk. And we do. There's no real format. This is not like your classic radio call-in per se. It's kind of like just BS hour. I do have some funny stuff, though. I did want to bring something on that I thought was funny, and we'll kick it off with something from that. You guys know who Harry Sisson is? He's a left-wing turd, little influencer guy who does whatever the heck he does. He talks and tries to act tough, but is not tough. He's been in this scandal of late that has kind of broke out. It's been how many women he's been messaging online. I don't know what the lure is, but I guess having some access to fame, they find him to be attractive because of his access to political power or something. Very weird. Anyway, shame on whoever's interested in that, but there's a market. So he's meeting. What did my buddy used to say? He used to say the problem with dick pics is that there was a market demand and he had an unlimited supply. I think that's what one of my friends used to say. It's one of my favorite comments. Makes no sense to me. It's totally classic. In any case, Harry Sisson saw that there was a demand and he met it with a supply. Pretty creepy. Somebody turned all of his DMs and his text messages that had been leaked in screenshots into a punk rock song. So as we wait for our first call, I'm going to give you that because it's pretty hilarious. It's actually kind of a jam. So we'll do that. Anyway, the phone number is available in our pinned version. You guys can find it over here. I'm going to drop it into our Rumble chat, so you guys have access to it over there. It's also in the show description, in the notes, if you're watching over on YouTube. If you want to be part of the program, that's what you do. Like I said, it's the incentive to get you all to jump in here if you choose. Now it is over in the Rumble chat. And here is Harry Sisson text messages to a punk rock jam. You guys give me, it's a little explicit, so don't be listening while there's kids around, I guess. But here we go.
Damn, you're sexy, like fuck you off the wine tasting, but that's just me. I think that's a great idea. God damn it, I never lied to you. We were not exclusive, and I made it abundantly clear. I didn't want that, and you said it was fine. I haven't done anything that was allowed within the parameters. We said, why are you screenshotting? You're hot, feels pretty great, I can't lie. The verdict is you look sexy as fuck, court adjourned. LLOC, your opinion is the only one that matters. Got that ass is fat, looks amazing. adjourn LMO. See, your opinion is the only one that mattered. God, that ash is fat, looks amazing.
I don't know. I like it. Like, I could go for a run and put that on and it wouldn't bother me. Go figure. Maybe I'm twisted. Maybe that's just how my brain works. But I thought it was pretty good. So that's what I started with. The phone line is open. You guys are welcome to call in. And if that's not interesting to you tonight, then no big deal. The question came up when I think it was in our locals chat, which I don't put up on the screen here. The question was, when am I going to move into the new studio space? That's the surprise. I'm already in it. That's the brilliance of having a set wall that goes with you. So the only person that noticed is our longtime listener, Rose Lopez. Saint Rose was, as far as I could tell, the only person who could eyeball it. She said that the lighting was different, and she picked up at least that there was a change. The rest of you, nobody noticed on the daily podcast, which makes me happy. I think that's pretty cool. Able to get away with pulling it off. It means it did what it was supposed to do, which is what I knew I was eventually going to be moving. And at some point in time, we were going to make a jump into a different location. I'll give you the thing. Okay, so here's the possible topics we can chat about, you all. Here's what I got. Cybertruck attacks, leftists melting down on that, dismantlement of the Department of Energy. Could be interesting. We could talk about that. If you guys have any experience working with DOE, if you have any experience working in the teaching field, that would all be fine. Let's see. Is it a Tesla truck or is it a Cybertruck? This one, apparently I put this clip out earlier today and it made it onto Timcast for some reason. I don't know if you just couldn't find these kind of clips. I have a weird group of things, but here's something that jumped out at me. And we can also talk about, my number one favorite thing to do, write a tweet or a post that has nothing to do with any of you, because I don't know a lot of people individually, but someone follows me and then they get really hurt that my post hurt their feelings, and then they're surprised that I don't feel sorry about it. Because I don't. I really don't feel sorry about it. In fact, I just want to talk to your husband if you're upset about that. Put your husband on the phone is my favorite thing to do. That happened again today, and it was something to do, I think, with this video clip, so I'll play you that as well. Hopefully it is dialed in properly.
People keep correcting me, telling me that it's Cybertruck and not Tesla truck. I don't fucking care. I don't care what it's called. I hate them. I hate them. I need them off the streets. I need them off the road. I need them off the highway. I need them out of my town. I need them out of my country. Fuck. I'm so sick of them. I'm so sick of Tesla trucks. Cybertrucks. Fuck.
Are they going to be okay, y'all? What do you think? Are we going to have anybody be able to help these people out? Is that the best business to be in right now? Is the best business to get involved in the mental health field and specifically cater to folk who have TDS? Is that what we should be doing? Maybe so. I threw the chat up on the screen. If you're watching over on YouTube, thanks for joining us. We appreciate that. If you're watching over on Rumble, we always appreciate you guys over there. I don't know what you mean, but the beard is helping. What is the beard helping? Interesting. There was a fair number of comments about the beard growth. So you guys may not realize this, but we tape all of our interview shows. And so you don't get it live. You get it delayed by a couple of days. And sometimes I hold on to it. So we recently did an interview with Jordan Grudrow, right? And he was the Green Beret. He was the one that was supposedly involved in trying to overthrow Venezuela. Very interesting story. My BS meter doesn't go off all that much. There's got to be some credibility to what he was saying. At least it seemed like it was. Like I said, I've got friends who are Green Berets who said otherwise, but I don't think they've ever sat and listened to him. They certainly haven't interviewed him and asked him to get the specifics on what was going on. So if you listen to that program, great. If you didn't, I recommend it. But let me give you a heads up on two things. Number one, I taped the interview and then I played it a couple of weeks later. So you got it after a period of time, and between the time that I played it and now, my beard grew some, so I look older in like one day from the Sunday to the Monday. But it wasn't an overnight beard growth, obviously. The second thing is, one of the things we always talk about the intelligence circles and the way that intelligence operations are run, and you guys are experiencing this. And you've probably lived through some of these that have been played out in the public sphere. Jordan's statement to me was that he created a secondary objective for a tactical force to come in and land in Venezuela. If you guys didn't listen to the interview, this won't make sense, but go back and listen. Probably worth the time. Everybody who's heard it told me it was very engrossing. It's a very interesting conversation. So the guy landed a beach force, basically, and that was a secondary objective. And they had tactical and achievable missions on that secondary force. But it was to distract and to get people focused on it so that the primary mission force could go do the coup that was supposed to happen. Okay. If that's the case, he had a secondary objective and a primary objective, both achievable. But the secondary didn't have to be achieved in order for the primary to happen. In the same way, George Hill and I were talking about this, and it's our belief that it's very likely that Jordan's operation to overthrow Venezuela was in fact a secondary objective that somebody else was carrying on, and the primary objective was something else, maybe setting up Donald Trump, maybe doing whatever it was doing. And his had to be tactically achievable as well. But when it failed, it didn't matter because it was not something they had to achieve to get their primary mission objective. Does that make sense? And there's a very high likelihood that that's what you're seeing. When you see the way these intel operations work, one of them is turning clockwise, and the one on the outside of that is doing the counterclockwise, and the one outside of that is going back clockwise. So you have multiple different people that are spinning ops in different directions, all of which look totally legit to the people that are working those ops, but none of them understand that they are an op within an op within an op. And when that stuff happens, you're just left basically scratching your head going like, how did I get played? Because everything sounded legit and up on my end. And the odds are pretty likely that that's what we're talking about. These are the way these things work. And it's troubling that that's the case. In any case, that's what we're talking about. That's the danger of having a law enforcement agency. That's the reason why I'm sitting here. We're talking right now with my attorneys about whether or not we're going to be able to settle the lawsuit that we have in front of DOJ. And every time we talk about this stuff, it brings me back to the fact that, like, one, I sit and get to work in a room that's in my house, and we have this little time together. We do the podcast every morning. I put a fair amount of time into that. It's not a thing that I thought I was going to be doing. I certainly didn't go out there and look for it. And then the second thing that goes on is that we have this crazy amount of time. I was telling the attorneys, I'm like, this is what I think my settlement terms would look like if we're going to go do it. But it looks nuts to me to even put it down on paper. And then I start walking through the history of how we ended up standing here, how my family ended up being in this fourth home in the last, let's say, 4 years, that I've moved everything I've owned multiple times over. And it occurred to me, it's like, well, the last 4 years have been pretty crazy. They've probably been pretty crazy for you. So we can talk about that if you guys want. Again, this is your hour. And anybody who's sitting there in our locals chat, there's like a dozen of you or so. Pick up the phone, dial in. Let's see what goes on. Let's see what's going on in your head. It's been a pretty interesting week. We've had a lot of movement. Obviously, Trump just signed the executive order to dismantle the Department of Education, which we'll see where it goes. I listened to a couple of different folks on Fox saying, listen, it was started with an executive order. It was then codified by Congress. It is going to be eliminated by executive order, and then it'll be followed up, most likely, with some information from Congress. Because once they take it apart, there's not going to be any reason to hold on to it. It'll be some vestigial organization. And what are you going to do with that? I guess I'll talk about the other thing, too, that I've been touching on of late, which is that I will be on InfoWars on Sunday night. I'm going to get on with Chase. And we did some digging. InfoWars had kind of an interesting little FOIA return. If you guys don't watch InfoWars, I do occasionally because I find some of the stuff they talk about interesting. And having talked to Alex, having talked to Owen, having talked to Chase and some others, there's some very good information and there's some very unsubstantiatable information on there at the same time. So some of the things, and I told him too, I was like, look, I'm a little bit more accountable for the rounds that I send downrange. There's always the possibility somebody's going to come and hold me to account for the words I say. But by and large, I find them to be at least entertaining at the very least. They're fun. They're smart people. When you talk to them, none of these guys are dim bulbs. So whether or not they're playing up information that they can't substantiate or whether they actually have sources that I don't have, then I don't know. It doesn't make a difference to me. But they've all been swatted of late. And so this has been something that's been kicking around. We just heard, I played you the Harry Sisson video. On top of that, his little buddy, his boyfriend, Chris Morrow, apparently was swatted. And if that's the case, which there's a big and, right? I think I was talking to, or texting back and forth with Scott Farish, and it's like the default position and expectation is that if it's a Democrat saying it and all the Republicans have been the ones who have been dealing with it, you're probably talking about somebody who's lying, who's trying to jump in and clout chase, and his story doesn't seem similar to the others. But assuming that it is the case, swatting's a real big issue. So we had kind of a fun little move here. I live in Williamson County, Texas, which is on the north side of Austin. Thankfully, I don't live in Travis County. Not thankfully, on purpose, I don't live in Travis County, right? And I was telling Owen, I was like, I reached out to the sheriff's department. First of all, they knew exactly what I was talking about. They were aware of the national trend with the swatting that's been going on, which is so much different than if you were to call like a left-leaning city where they don't understand. And I told a deputy, I just said, I would like to get my name flagged so that you guys don't decide to come and swat me on accident. And we can have some kind of a prearranged situation where we're just going to have safety and we don't have to worry about one of us getting into what I would call a blue on blue or, whatever, civilian on blue. And so anyway, so we set up a little deal. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We've got our first caller on the line. Who am I talking to?
This is Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder.
That was my de guerre in Da Nang, Vietnam.
Is that right?
I did radio intercept work against the North Vietnamese. The reason I'm calling is because I'm curious about whether you vaccinated while you were in.
Vaccinated against what?
COVID.
You're wondering if I was vaccinated against what? COVID when?
COVID-19.
Yeah,
wasn't the vaccine mandated for everybody in government?
It was. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I don't work there anymore.
Okay, so you did not get vaccinated.
Correct.
Okay. Have you done any investigations into what I call mRNA shedding? Basically, it's vaccinated people shedding the spike protein onto unvaccinated people. Mm-hmm. And the fact that, basic COVID-19 was developed in our own country to begin with before it was moved to China. And this is biowarfare that we are dealing with here. And, I'm suffering from long COVID. I am now partially crippled. Blood circulation has been hit hard, spike protein clotting, mm-hmm. and damaging the interior cells of my blood vessel walls. And so the nerve in my right leg has died, okay, giving me a condition called drop foot. And so basically I'm suffering peripheral neuropathy, mm-hmm. and I'm looking at the fact that, with RFK in his Health and Human Services, I don't know if you've seen all the lawsuits coming out by people that sued for being forced out of their job for not being vaccinated.
Yeah.
86,000 to a teacher down in Tennessee, 3 million to 3 workers for BART in San Francisco, mm-hmm. 30 million to a nurse laid off from a hospital because she refused the vaccination. And the latest one I heard about was the government has given 300 million to a vaccine injured. And I don't know if that was military or not. Anyway, I'm seeing this build up. The laws are going to cascade, I believe. This thing makes the smoking lawsuit look like, a baby. And basically, I'm just curious if, that interests you at all in your investigative stuff.
Well, as far as doing investigations, I'm kind of out of the investigation game now. I do a lot of analysis, but I don't do investigations per se because that actually involves resources I don't have anymore. But I did follow a lot of the stories about shedding. I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. I didn't specifically get any documentation that says it, but I read the same things that you probably did. I've read the studies saying that it was coming from people and being shed out and being transmitted as a byproduct of the injection. So I saw that as well. My story regarding that was very specifically that the DOJ told people who worked for DOJ entities. I was obviously working for the FBI, but we were a sub entity of DOJ. And they pushed out, it was a guy named Lee Loftus, who was the AAG, the Assistant Attorney General for Administration. They had a couple of different AAGs. And he was sending out these pieces. He was the person on behalf of the Biden administration that enforced the executive order and said, these are the policies and this must be done. And so their statement was something like November 8th or whatever the hell it was. It was sometime in November of 2021 that everybody either needed to be vaccinated or they needed to have declared their vaccine status, and then things would start happening. And so I was one of the first people in the entire FBI to get a religious accommodation request in, which was never evaluated for whatever it's worth. Stevie, they didn't even look at it. They just ignored it. And we had documentation. I actually managed to gather about 350 FBI employees, which represented about 10% of the entire FBI non-vaccinated workforce. We got them all together. We were all on encrypted comms and discussing policy and changes and so on. And what we were able to align was that, one, every field office dealt with it differently. So there were 56 field offices, which handled it differently, and headquarters units. And then on top of that, we were keeping track of the religious accommodations and the medical accommodations website, which changed something like 19 times in 60 days, but hadn't changed for several years prior. So they were updating and moving the goalposts in real time, which we were keeping track of. And then I got together with a group that's called Feds for Medical Freedom, which was a bunch of federal employees who didn't want to get vaccinated as well. And we had a sort of common denominator. I paid out of my own pocket for about 5 different federal employees in different agencies so we could get the majority of federal agencies represented in a bulk lawsuit that was filed in Galveston, Texas, Southern District of Texas. That went forward into the Fifth Circuit, and it ended up in the injunction that stopped all federal workers from being forced to do the vaccine mandate. But that didn't actually help me at all because I was actually kicked out of the office in end of November of 2021. And I went a little step further than a lot of people did. Not only did I not get the vaccine, what I did is I said I was not going to test for COVID unless I showed symptoms because I'd been a paramedic for over a decade at that time. I had a top secret clearance, and I stated that it was very obvious to me that if you were going to have people test for symptoms that they didn't even have the disease, then you were doing it in a discriminatory fashion, and I don't believe in that. That's against my sincerely held beliefs. So I ended up actually getting AWOL'd, which you know from the military, but I didn't know that was a thing in civilian service. I'd never heard that term. They actually AWOL'd me for enough hours to remove me and fire me from federal service, but then they let me come back, and then they took my badge and my gun over something that was Second Amendment related, which was even weirder. So my story is a little bit complicated, but I was 100% no-go, and it was very obvious to me what was going on when they were pushing this kind of stuff out there. The upside is we actually did get some positive results for others. And I do think, like you said, the trend is more people are recognizing these, whether they be vaccine injured. We had one calling on last week. I think her name is Tracy, if I'm getting my callers correct. She called and told us about her vaccine injury. So I know a lot of people have had that experience. And then obviously a lot of folks in the DOD are starting to get a little bit of at least the opportunity maybe to come back. So I think we are cleaning things up in the country. But all of what you're saying rings very true to me. I've been following some of these lawsuits. I'd be very interested in the $300 million one. So are you subscribing over on X or are you subscribed to us over on Locals, if you don't mind me asking?
I just subscribed to you on Rumble.
On Rumble, okay.
And in subscribing to you on Rumble, you forced me into Locals.
Okay, well, that's Rumble forcing you into it. That's not me forcing you, but I appreciate that. Well,
you're the only subscription I've done on Rumble that's made me go to Locals to deal with you.
Interesting.
And the thing is, I just don't like, how Locals does things. I was on it for quite a while and got off of it, but, now I'm back on, and I am Stevie Wonder on Locals.
Okay. I feel like I've seen your handle out there. What you can do, and if you wouldn't mind if I can put some homework on, especially if you're looking at these these lawsuits or these news sort of stories that are popping up, I'd love a post with a couple of links in there, because I know that, one, the rest of the community would be interested as well. And you can make it public or you can make it subscriber. It doesn't matter to me. But I'd also like to take a look at some of these things, some of which, because we're firing them off to our attorneys and saying, here's some of the compensation that people are seeing. Here's some of the stuff that's going on, you know, in other areas, and they might be in different districts or different circuits. But, you know, precedent is precedent, and showing settlements. Like you said, I saw that nurse. I think there was a Catholic nurse in maybe Minnesota. Does that sound right? She got removed from her job for not taking the vaccine.
No, this was over on the East Coast.
Okay, even better.
Okay,
so the more the merrier on that stuff.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a SEAL lawsuit out there for mandate, and you know, the way I look at it is going to be horrified about what I tell you next. Is I'm part of the medical underground in this country now. Last year I spent $5,000 fighting long COVID. Like I say, VA was not treating me properly, and so I ended up leaving. I'm now with Dr. Pierre Corey, Leading Edge Clinic, and he is one of these. He was one of the doctors standing on the White House lawn when Trump got COVID.
Okay, and
he was treated with hydroxychloroquine. And basically exposed myself to COVID intentionally and got it in November of 2023.
In 23. Was that the first time you got it?
No, I was shed on at the VA in 2022.
Okay.
I visited them for some stuff, and literally over the course of the next couple of months, I went from pre-diabetic to diabetic, enlarged prostate, blood clots in my lungs, which they accidentally found looking at my prostate and bladder radiation. You know, I don't know if it's a CRT or MRI, but basically X-rays, and they saw spots in my lungs. I was eating breakfast at the cantina, which I love at VA, and I got a call, and it was radiology from where I just come from. They said, "Are you still here at the hospital?" And I said, "Yes, I am." They said, "Go to the emergency room now."
And so they went and to try to work on that pulmonary embolism.
They actually slapped me into ICU, put me on a heparin drip overnight, the heaviest blood thinner you can have.
Yep.
And next morning, they found deep vein thrombosis in my left leg. Now, all of these things, what people don't seem to understand about COVID is it's not COVID that's the danger. It's the spike protein. The spike protein is a bioengineered gene therapy. And basically, it is now being put into our food supply through vaccines. mRNA vaccines are being given to chickens, pigs, and cattle. So it's being put in our food supply. Like I say, we're being shed on. Let's see. The diabetes, when I went into that condition, they prescribed, they prescribed metformin, which is the standard for diabetes treatment. And I refused it. And I started doing my research, and basically I have not been diabetic for a year with diet change and weight loss and, watching my glucose daily.
For sure.
And so
what sort of diet change you get into?
I went with a keto diet. Okay. Basically, low carbohydrates.
Yep.
Okay. Carbohydrates just drive my glucose nuts.
I bet.
And that's unfortunately because I do love my French fries and my cheese biscuits at Red Lobster.
Okay.
And so
is there still Red Lobster? Didn't they go out of business? Isn't that what happened?
They declared bankruptcy and they're now back out of bankruptcy. They
okay, good.
Closed a few locations.
Okay.
And so, my spook stuff, basically the medical underground, just to give you an idea, ivermectin got outlawed here in Kentucky and Ohio and Indiana. The governors of all three states mandated that pharmacies not fill ivermectin prescriptions. Now, to me, that is practicing medicine without a license. And I think all these people should go to prison. Well, it gets even worse because the President of the United States did the same thing. Getting ivermectin here in the U.S., typically the cheapest I found it is like $2 a pill.
Right.
And understand something about ivermectin. It was created by a Japanese researcher who found this mold on this grass off a golf green in Japan, and he found out it killed parasites. So basically, he wanted the people in Africa to take advantage of this, so he never patented it. Okay? And basically, it was used in Africa on river blindness, which is caused by a parasite.
Yes.
Well, the thing is, the cheapest I found ivermectin here in the U.S. is $2 a pill. A 2-month supply originally, when I went outside the VA, cost me $240.
What kind of dosage are you taking for that?
And that was, I'm at 36 milligrams. It's basically 0.4 milligrams per kilogram of weight. Okay.
So you're doing, you said 36 milligrams?
36, yeah. And I'm right around 200, 205. Okay. And I've been on ivermectin now for, let's see, 9 months.
Okay.
And I've ordered it from India direct. And I got 1,000 pills from India for $70. And half of that was shipping.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So basically, I was getting my ivermectin at 3.5 cents a pill.
Yeah, I think they say a nickel is high for ivermectin if you were going to be going at market value. So that sounds right.
Exactly. So the U.S. basically you're dealing with an ivermectin that's manufactured by the U.S. pharmaceutical companies, and even though it's not patented, they still end up charging you on that. Well, the thing is, I also got into a blood cracker because I had a blood test done on me that's only done 2 places in the world. One is a doctor down in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Jordan Vaughn, and the other one is a doctor in South Africa. And those two are working with each other. They have developed a test looking for micro blood clotting. And micro blood clotting, this test is like $400 or $500, but I had it done on me, and I came back as a 3 out of 4 or moderate micro blood clotting. And the report from Dr. Vaughn's clinic is that the stuff they've actually got photographs. They use micron electroscopes and dyes.
Okay.
And one of the things had this string of circles. Okay. Well, got in studying, looking at that, and come to find out what it says in the report is that my micro blood clotting is consistent with spike protein, and it also is consistent with damage to the endothelium, which is the lining of your blood vessels. So those circles with, a long string of circles, that was pieces of the lining of my blood. And so I think what's caused all my conditions is the blood is clotting. It's down there in the capillaries of my feet. The interior walls are damaged, and they are starving the nerves of oxygen.
And then you end up with the neuropathy.
Because of lack of blood flow. And then you end up with the neuropathy. And of course, the next thing is, you move into gangrene
Sure.
if it gets bad enough. And so that's what I've been fighting now since last July,
Yeah.
is trying to detox myself. And the whole thing is this blood cracker that I'm on 3 blood thinners, basically.
Yeah. What is the blood cracker?
And-
That was the question the chat's asking. What is that a slang for something, or is that the idea of that's a blood thinner that you're just using a different term for?
Well, blood thinners are anticoagulants.
Right.
You've got anticoagulants and you've got antiplatelets.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And the third thing is basically, now I've read this somewhere, but I've also read conflicting information, is that the blood thinners, once you've got a clot, blood thinners don't work against clots.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so this drug I'm taking that's manufactured in Italy, okay, I'm having to get from Russia. Okay.
Okay.
And the Russian is shipping it through Serbia, and I got a 2-month supply. It's like $170 for 2 months supply. It works good against breaking up existing clots, including microclots. Okay. And so we're working on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is that I got that originally in September, went through the 2 months. I reordered in early November. And after 3 weeks, I emailed the guy in Russia and said, what's the status on my purchased goods? Because that's all you can say in any of your emails or conversations is purchased goods. And I mean, this really is living in a medical underground, and you'll see why here in a minute. When I went to pay for my India ivermectin to begin with, I had PayPal asking me what I was ordering
Right.
from India and then refusing my payment. And I said, you're not allowed to, ask me about medical information. That's against HIPAA.
Sure.
And they came back and said the seller had been blacklisted.
That sounds right too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did that. Well, with this drug from Russia, from Italy, actually, the drug that I'm getting from Russia, the guy came back to me and said it arrived in New York on November the 26th, where it would have hit customs.
Sure.
Well, December came and went, January came and went, and, I basically, was just about to reorder again, saying the thing got confiscated or who knows what.
Sure.
And the whole thing is, I was talking to my nurse practitioner who I'm working with outside the VA, who's part of Dr. Corey's clinic.
Yep.
And she told me President Biden blocked all drugs coming in from outside the United States in November of last year.
That sounds right too. Not that they should do that, but it sounds like something they did. Mm-hmm.
Well, and here's the thing. The leading partner with this clinic is a nurse practitioner and with an advanced degree.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he went down to the post office because one of his drug shipments had arrived from overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And he got to the post office, and the postmaster at his post office told him they had been contacted by customs to hold the shipment. And they basically gave it to him anyway because he talked to him. He knows what's going on with this stuff. And magically, my shipment showed up on my doorstep February the 9th.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So how long was that between order and it actually appearing?
November 7th was when I ordered.
Yep.
Okay. First time it took about 3 weeks. So I was expecting it around the end of November.
Right.
And it finally showed up February the 9th. And of course, that's when Trump became president.
Now, is this drug actually available in the United States, obviously without something that you can access it, or is it something that is only made overseas and only sold overseas and only accessible from overseas?
It has been not approved by the FDA. It is truly a drug, not like some supplements that I'm taking, and I'll talk about that also.
But this isn't like a TPA. This isn't like a Activase or something like that you can use to do antithrombolytic type issues.
It is a true drug, okay, and it literally is. They've been using it in Europe for 30 years, I think, 20 or 30 years, and it's proven to be safer than metformin. Okay. In some of the studies they've done.
Yep.
And so it's not approved by the FDA. And the next thing is that the supplements I'm on, and in addition to ivermectin, I'm taking some supplements. There's some new supplements that are showing up that I'm about to start on, and hopefully between these two supplements, not only will I unclog my blood vessels, but I will repair my dead nerves.
Sure.
There are two things out there. Both of them, well, one of them's available over the counter, DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, and I use it topically, and that penetrates your skin and oxygenates your skin and your blood. Okay. And the other one I'm just fixing to start on is something called chlorine dioxide. And this is known as the universal antidote. Chlorine dioxide, the astronauts have been taking it into space with them. It's made up, you have to make it yourself.
Okay.
Okay. It's off-the-shelf ingredients, sodium chlorite and hydrochloric acid. And basically you mix it together, and then you mix the resulting called MMS, which is miracle something solution. And basically you take this stuff and it oxygenates your blood cells. It injects something like 10 to 12 million molecules of oxygen per red blood cell in your system. And what the oxygen does, it does two things. It's an antiviral, everything having to do with inflation, or I'm sorry, what's the word I'm looking for?
You're looking for inflammation.
Inflammation, exactly. And it takes care of that, and it oxygenates your blood, and that should get oxygen back to my nerve cells. And there's a new one they found out, by the way, that is, it's a supplement, something you can buy off the shelf through Amazon. Okay, the kits. But I would strongly encourage anybody who looks into it, you really have to dig into it so that you don't overdose yourself with it.
Yeah, I'm reading about that right now. There's antiviral, but there's also overdose options. So you got to be real careful with what you're doing there.
Exactly. And the whole thing is, that's really, here's my attitude. And this has become, true since the VA mandated the vaccinations, and I knew they were bad news.
Yep.
Is basically, I've made myself responsible for my own health care.
Indeed.
And Did
you feel like, were you pressured to get the vaccine at the VA? Was that something you experienced? And then did you eventually get it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you were treated like an outcast. You had to mask up every time you went into the VA.
Oh, I know. I actually went there.
It didn't matter.
So, Stevie, I'll just tell you, I was told that if I wanted to document any mental health issues, to go to the VA, which is what I did. I got on the phone with the El Paso VA, and that was the area I was in. I was in New Mexico. Yep. So I wanted to get in, and I said, look, I just want to talk to somebody on the phone because I'm dealing with some pretty wild amounts of anxiety because of what was going on with the FBI basically telling me, you got to do this thing. And by the way, we're going to take your badge and your gun, and we're going to take your career and all the other kind of things that went along. And, you know, I'm a father. I got little kids. I got a wife, and we had a house and a mortgage and all the things that people have. So I said, well, okay, I got to document some of the anxiety.
So they tested you for PTSD? Did they test you for PTSD? You went through?
It never even went that well, because here's what happened. So, I mean, I'm a rated condition. I got 30% disability from my time in the Air Force. And so I had a relationship with the VA when I was in Texas. This is all before going into the Air Force, into the FBI. But when I went to go get a documentation, because all I wanted to do was move my file from Texas to New Mexico and talk to somebody in mental health so I could get it documented, like, hey, I'm having trouble sleeping. Hey, I've got, you know, tremendous gastrointestinal disturbances, all the things that happen when you have massive anxiety because your life turns upside down. And they said, well, the only way we can get you into the clinic is if we do a full intake. And I said, well, great, but I don't really need that. I just want to talk to somebody. What do you think? Like, what if I told you I'm you know, having any kind of, you know, bad ideology or ideation rather? Can you put somebody on the phone with me? And they said, no, we got to do the full intake. Show up at the clinic. We'll do a blood test. We'll write up your file, do a medical history, and then you'll be in our system. I said, fine. So I showed up, right, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, at the physical clinic for the VA. And they said, you can't come in here without a mask on. And I said, well, I'm not going to put a mask on. So what do you want to do? And they said, you have to have a mask on so you can get your blood test. I said, I'll do you a better one. Why don't you just give me whatever vials you want me to fill and hand me your blood draw kit, and I'll do it myself. I'll do it right out here in the parking lot. I don't give a shit. I've drawn blood in much worse conditions. I've treated people in uglier spaces. I've done it with night vision on upside down. So why don't you just go ahead and give me what you need, and I'll get you your samples. You guys can run them, and we're all good. And I don't have to put on a mask because I'm not going to do it. And by the way, that guy's mask is on his nose, and that guy's mask is on his beard, and that guy doesn't even know what he's doing. He's confused. So you're not even wearing masks properly, and they don't do shit anyway. So we're not going to wear masks. I'm not going to participate in that. I said I'm not an actor, so don't expect me to come in and do theater with you guys. And they brought the security guy out who had like a cloth mask on that said Army. I said, listen, Army, I appreciate what you're doing here, but like, I'm not going to put on a mask, and I don't need to go in there. I just need to give you guys some blood, apparently, which I don't really care to do, but I don't mind. I'll draw it myself. And he said, sir, you're now going to be asked to leave. You're going to be trespassed if you stay any longer. So I didn't get any mental health from the VA because I wouldn't put on a fucking mask, of all things. You can't make it up.
There you go.
I'm kind of one of those guys that doesn't like being told what to do at this point in time in my life. And I wasn't taking any orders from someone in the government at that point. So anyhow, I think you're speaking to a kindred spirit in that sense.
All right. Well, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to hog the show. So
no, I think you fascinate a lot of people, and especially if you'll throw some of this information, I think, onto the locals, you're going to get a lot of other people that are interested. And I see your handle on there, so I'll tag you with a post. But I have a contact at the VA that has been working on trying to get veterans who were pressured into or feel like they contracted COVID through the VA. He's a VA employee. He's 100% Army, 100% disabled Army veteran, combat vet, solid guy. Went back to work for the VA because he just wanted to help other veterans. And he's been kind of my inside man out there looking into problems. And he's been aggressively pushing, both as a whistleblower to Congress and also into the public space. He's been trying to share that the VA coerced and pressured veterans, a lot of them against their will, didn't give them a choice, took people who were compromised and didn't have any other choices in life, and just said, if you do not get this shot, you will not get treatment in the VA, because they were trying to up their numbers. And many of those people experienced vaccine injuries. And if that's the case, he said that they actually should have the same type of secondary condition and disability rating. It should actually be recognized on their VA record as something that the VA did to them, in the same way that your military service will qualify you for disabilities. So some people should bump up their ratings, and that may be life-changing for certain people. He's been working on that on the background, and there's been some movement forward in Congress. So if you're, like I said, we'll go back and forth on the locals bit of it too when we're not on the air here. And I'd be more than happy to kind of share and get you in touch with Sonny, because this is his passion project right now. And some people need to have access to it, and it's a good reminder that it's out there.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at doing like a monthly biowarfare thing with my local American Legion, VFW, and I've got some veterans organizations here in Northern Kentucky I'm a member of. I'm going to see if I can talk them into, doing a monthly thing on, because this thing is it's horrifying to me.
It's not going anywhere either.
I'm concerned.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that were really hurt, and I think that at least there's some people that would like to. What is that? What would they call it? The COVID absolution? That's not what they called it. It's something else. They just wanted to move on from it. A lot of people wanted to just, say they wanted to be absolved of any kind of treatment they did, but there was a lot of dehumanizing treatment that happened in the last couple of years. It's part of the story that I think we're all living. Maybe that's what I have in common with a lot of the people that listen to me. It's that we all kind of saw some bullshit happening, and we called it for what it was. We said it honestly. We didn't say it in spitefulness, right? It wasn't in indignation per se. It was just saying you don't get to treat Americans this way. And we watched something pretty wild happen. So a lot of folks didn't, and they got hurt.
As far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm concerned, the only way the government is going to fix this is if they offer free detoxification through every government agency.
Well, they'll screw that
military.
Up. Well, I don't have a lot of faith in the way. You're not probably wrong, but yeah.
Well, with RFK in there, I'm hoping, I know he's on our side on this thing, and I've seen him a couple of times in person.
Yep.
Not talked to him directly, but I've seen him. And by the way, just so you're aware, I have elected the two, I call them the new Kentucky sharpshooters.
Okay.
Daniel Boone anyway, Kentucky has always been known, to be rebels.
Yep.
And if you look at Thomas Massey and you look at Rand Paul being the only Republicans that voted against this latest spending bill from Congress, I can't tell you how proud I am that Kentucky is out there up front in trying to get this out of control government, back under control. And so I was so happy. I've been a long time follower of Dan Bongino. And of course, now that he's moved on, to his job, his is, let's see, the FBI or
deputy director there.
Anyway.
Yep.
Exactly. He's gone now. So that's how I ended up on you. I've only been on you about a month or so.
Okay, fair enough. Well, if you want to go back and hear the first time that I ever spoke to anybody publicly, which is, I didn't plan on being a public figure, and I didn't plan on doing interviews with people, and I certainly didn't plan on telling my story. I signed up to be an FBI agent, and that's all I wanted to do. My first public story was with Dan Bongino. So you can find that on his channel. If you look on Rumble, you can go back to September of 2022. And I told my story for the first time on his program in a 2-part series. We talked for about 2 hours. And this is how dedicated to this fight that we were. I told my wife when we decided not to get the shots, I said, look, if I don't get the shot, I'm going to lose this job. And she said, that's okay. You'll get another job. I said, okay, well, if we lose the job, we're going to lose the house. I'm going to have to sell it because I don't have money to pay for it. And I don't want to, just bleed our savings dry. We're going to have to figure something else out. She said, that's okay too. So she was in my corner on that. And so we decided together, that's what we were going to do. I sold my house in New Mexico, which was a beautiful house. Every time I think back to it, my daughters, who are just getting old enough to remember it, my oldest at least does, she's 7. And she's like, we had a really neat house. It's like, yeah, we did. We were on 2 acres. We were right next to the mountains. We had just this beautiful look. We had, 12 mule deer that would bed down in the back grass behind the house every day. I'd go out there and look and see them on my thermals. I could have coyotes running around through the arroyos and whatnot. We had all kinds of jackrabbits, and we had owls and bats, and we had skunks and other wild stuff, just critters. And we sold the house. I left the closing table of selling our house because of all this nonsense, and drove directly from the closing table to the airport in El Paso, got on a plane, flew to Miami, got a car picked up, and it drove me straight to Dan Bongino, and I told my story within 12 hours of getting rid of my house and basically being homeless. So we've been fully committed to it for quite a while at this point. I mean, since it's been a thing that went public. But yeah, Dan obviously was the first place we went and told the story, and I'm hopeful he figures out what's going on in the FBI, because I've given Kash Patel and him a lot of hints about where to look. And so they've hired a couple of my friends, from what I can tell, who are giving him the roadmap of what needs to be done. But we got a lot of problems in this country, and COVID is clearly one of them that's not going away, and it's very personal for a lot of people. And then there's this other thing, this ugly government that's been hunting down a lot of us. And hopefully you're not on that list too. But, if you're listening to me and Dan and you're listening to others, you're probably on the list.
I was in D.C. on January the 6th.
Yeah, well, there you're on that list too then. That's fair.
And well, not necessarily, because I don't know that they could have tracked my phone because the cell signal was so jammed up when we were there. I was there with another Vietnam vet. We drove up from Kentucky.
Yep.
And we got there at 9:30 or 9 because it was supposed to start at 10. And the crowd was already so big that we couldn't get close enough we could see the Jumbotron, but we were halfway between the White House and the Washington Monument.
Yep.
And, all the stage was there next to the White House. So we could hear the speakers, but we couldn't tell what they were saying. We could see the Jumbotron, but couldn't see anything on it. At 10:30, it was cold. It was kind of drizzling. And I finally looked at him and I said, listen, I'm cold. I'm tired. I'm aching. Yeah. Why don't we go back to the hotel and watch this on TV and open a bottle of wine? And that's exactly what we were doing when January 6th came down.
Well, what do they say? Discretion is the better part of valor, or something to that effect. I think that might have been the right choice that day.
It was just, I don't know if you want to call it God's hand or, blind luck. But the thing is that, basically they've gone after people. I don't know if you follow Jeremy Brown or not.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. Well, of course, I've been following him since December of 2020.
Same.
Okay, when the FBI first tried to recruit him.
Yeah, that was DHS, actually. Those were DHS agents coming from Homeland Security, and they were on the FBI's JTTF. I remember that, too. I was in the bureau at the time, and I went, this is not going well. Like, what is my agency doing? I mean, here's the thing. I saw it happen while I was there, and I watched it. I watched a lot of good guys that retired and in disgust, and they said, basically, we just watched an agency crap all over 25 years worth of otherwise honorable service by running their own name through the mud, and I don't want to be associated anymore. I had friends that retired that planned on sticking around. They retired because of what happened on January 6th, because of the way the FBI reacted to it. And the worst types of people inside the bureau are the ones who did the reactions. They were the liberal, leftist-leaning, self-interested, never did any investigations, climbed the ladder kind of people. A lot of them were females. A lot of them had terrible ideas. And I've called a lot of them out to Congress, and they've gone and lied about me on the record. So maybe one day we'll get some justice and some perjury charges. But 100%, Jeremy Brown, I know he just recently got out, but he was one of the last guys out. It's one of the reasons why I talked to the Proud Boys when they went to jail for the first time, and I talked to them when they got out. I talked to Stuart Rose the other day. If you haven't seen that one, definitely check the sit-down we did talking to Stuart. He and I must have talked for 5 hours the other day. And it's crazy that the story, the stuff that happened to these guys, it's atrocious. It really is. A lot of them. They got done wrong.
My VSO at the VA here in Cincinnati, veteran service officer.
Yep.
The one that got me my 20% disability over the last couple of months. We started in October, and I'm now on 20% disability.
Okay.
For the first time on conditions I've been complaining to the VA about for 40 years.
Okay.
Tinnitus. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, and I came back from Vietnam, and I was air crew in the Navy, flying out of Da Nang.
Yep.
And literally, I had nightmares about plane crashes for years after I got out of the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
I went through 2 near-death experiences in the Navy and flying an aircraft. And the whole thing is, this guy was 27-year Marine Corps, and his wife was ex-Navy. They were at the VA as VSOs, and I'm saying, wait a minute, I don't understand. You're in the Marine Corps. You were in California. why? What are you doing here in Cincinnati? Because the governors are so you know, anti-COVID. I shouldn't say pro-COVID. I should pro-vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and stopping anything outside of the pharmaceutical industry. Basically, he and his wife left California. She lost her job as a teacher, and he lost his job, or he was retired, but he was mandated to get the vaccine, and both of them refused.
Yeah.
And so they ended up in Cincinnati because that's where their children live.
I got it.
And, you hear all these stories, and, as far as I'm concerned, the government owes people money for having lost their lives, okay, because of this nonsense. And like I say, it's something that the deeper I dig into this stuff, man, I'm finding out stuff. My sister's had Lyme disease for 40 years, and she was a flight surgeon in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
Come down, I don't know if this is hoax or not, but turns out Lyme disease may be a bioweapon. It's maybe one of the first gain of function stuff that was done here in the U.S. from scientists from Germany after World War II. Like I say, the deeper I get into this stuff, man, the crazier it gets. And
that is the truer. No truer statement has been said than that. The deeper you get into it, the crazier it gets. I'll put one caution in your head, which you probably already know from being on the earth long enough. But whenever you're reading this stuff, whatever you want to believe, make sure you're setting yourself to the opposite. Be a skeptic about it and go look for that evidence. But there's a lot of evidence of evil. I mean, evil's been out there for a long time, and I think that's the craziest thing about. It's the good and the bad. Everybody that listens to this audience, one of the first programs we ever did, we talked about it. And everybody that's called in and talked to me has said if they had a red button that they could push that would get rid of the internet and get rid of all the social media and just make it go away and take us back to the way it used to be when people had to pick up the phone or go write a letter or something or knock on your door, they would all do it. But there is something to say about having access to all the information we have, which is pretty incredible. And you certainly can do a lot of your own digging that you couldn't do previously. And so there is maybe something there. It's just how do you do it, and how do you vet these sources? And I know a lot of people get into some pretty wild stuff. I actually had a social media experience today where somebody was telling me something crazy about what they believe happened at Butler, PA, and I think a lot of people have just basically saw what they never got the answers they wanted for the JFK assassination, and they've held on to it for 50 years, and then they turned around and they just applied it to something that didn't happen in Butler. I think Butler, as much as anything else, it exposed how incompetent the government is capable of being, which anybody who's worked for them knows. It doesn't matter whether you were in the military on the DOD end or if you worked in civilian service, like the government is not, high-level operators. The government is screw ups and laziness and a bunch of other, with some really talented people in between as well. And anyhow, it's just, it's one of those things, like you say, the rabbit hole is deep and wide and dark. And so, look for that light in there too, if you can. Just make sure you're vetting your sources as you go in there. Don't get too wild about it.
No, absolutely. Well, I had a Vietnam spook brother died March of last year. Mm-hmm. And he and I were both enlisted in Da Nang in 1972. Mm-hmm. And I actually set up a website for us Big Lick Spooks. That was our group name. And I got 160 of us back together after 40 years. And he wrote a book. He stayed in the Navy and got out after 30 years as a lieutenant commander. Now, the whole thing is, Bob Morrison was a true believer, okay? Mm-hmm. And basically, he and I, when COVID hit, he and I used to talk a couple of times a month because we're both married to Filipinas. Mm-hmm. And he was fully vaccinated.
Sure.
And the thing is, I said, "Oh God, Bob, don't take any more of these vaccines." Well, the whole thing is that basically in December of 2023, he quit returning my calls.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out through back channels, people that were closer to him in Virginia Beach, that he had been diagnosed with bladder cancer.
Yeah.
And they had pulled an 8-pound tumor out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, for God's sake, how do you get an 8-pound tumor when you've got the best medical care that money will buy, being a retired military officer?
Mm-hmm.
You know, between Champ and Tri-Health and, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, basically that allows you to go to any doctor and, you know, and the whole thing is, how do you get an 8-pound tumor in those conditions? Well, it comes to find out, one of the things about the spike protein, you're going to be reading a lot about this, is turbo cancers.
Yep. No, I've heard it plenty.
And
I
this
agree.
guy, and the whole thing is, you know, I'm trying to get hold of him once I found this out. And at the same time, the first week in February, I read about a guy in Missouri who had been diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gone through all the radiation and chemotherapy, just like the VA did with Bob. Okay. And basically the VA did what they did with like this guy in Missouri. He was written off by his doctors.
Mm-hmm.
You're dead. Okay. We're going to put you in hospice care and call a priest. And basically, you know, we're going to set you up to die, you know, peacefully. And he got lucky because he had a friend of a friend who had a doctor that called him from the East Coast. And this doctor had treated breast cancer in women for 30 years. And she had heard about this thing that was curing cancer or causing cancer to go into remission, called ivermectin.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked to him for 3 hours on the phone. And basically her line was, what have you got to lose?
Right.
Your doctors have already said you're dead. Okay. He drove to Tennessee, where Tennessee you can get ivermectin over the counter. And this is human ivermectin, not veterinarian ivermectin.
Sure.
And basically he drove 8 hours round trip. He took ivermectin and was in full remission from his cancer. Stage 4, stage 5. And basically I called Bob and sent him that article I had found. And I called later trying to get hold of him to see if they had read what I had sent to them.
Yep.
And the first time they hung up on me because they didn't know who I was. And, you know, his wife and his daughter were there with him as he's dying. And basically the second time his daughter answered, I managed to get her to not hang up on me and explain. And the thing is, he died 2 weeks later. So I got to him too late. Okay. And it's just making me sick, the stuff I'm seeing even around me. I was talking to a neighbor today. His wife is being treated by a local hospital for scar tissue on her heart, which is like cardiomyopathy, myelitis. And the whole thing is that is a spike protein thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The spike protein attacks everything in your body. Blood cells, you know, your lungs, your heart, your brain. And it's just absolutely nuts.
Isn't it
Okay?
wild? Isn't it wild
engineered.
that this got unleashed when it did and how it did? And I mean, just all of it is just crazy. If you look back at, if you rewind the tape 4 years in this country, it's
Right.
It's so much. It's so much to take in. I guess you have to go back 4.5 years now at this point.
The election system's been overthrown. You know, it's the election system is corrupt. The medical system is corrupt. And I mean, when you talk about the medical system, it's corrupt top to bottom. Something I didn't realize till I got into this. You know who set up the first medical university?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And now I get,
Rockefeller.
yeah, I know.
Rockefeller.
I understand. And you wanted to get rid of all the holistic stuff.
Well, and basically your drugs are all developed from petroleum or
Of course.
coal.
Yep. Yeah, they're all
They're
organic
synthetic
chemistry.
drugs. Exactly.
Yep.
And the whole thing is the medical system teaches people to treat symptoms, not causes. So if you have this symptom, we've got this drug or this surgery. Okay, if you've got this symptom, and that's how medical training is done.
Yep.
At the university level, and then you get the government involved with the FDA, not allowing anything cheap to be allowed to be used by people.
You'll like the you'll like the clip I've got for tomorrow. I've got a doctor. I pulled a clip that I found. Doctor discussing studies on cholesterol in men specifically. And, they love to prescribe statins. I had that weird experience. I was 35. And I'm running 5-6 miles a day, getting prepped up to go off to the FBI Academy. Prior coming out of the military, I'm working as a paramedic, so I'm working a lot of hours, but I'm still doing a lot of fitness. And they did my blood work, and I was on a pretty high cholesterol, pretty high ketogenic diet. Basically, I'm eating a lot of cheeses and meats and very low carb. And so this lady comes to me and she goes, well, your blood work shows your cholesterol is real high and we'd like to put you on a statin. I said, oh, that's cool. You can like anything you want. I'm not interested. And she said, well, did you see your blood work? I said, just give me the paper and I'll look at it. I said, I'm a paramedic. I work in a hospital. I'll take a look at it. And I said, look, basically what you're showing is that about 30% out of what you consider to be the normal range is my HDL and the same thing for my LDL. And I'm not concerned about it. I said, I'm 35 and I'm healthy. She goes, well, what drugs do you take? I said, I don't take any drugs. She goes, no, what medications do you take? I said, I don't take any medications. She goes, when I say that, I mean, what prescriptions do you have? I said, lady, I don't take any prescriptions. I'm 35. I don't take any of your shit. I said, sometimes I take Zyrtec when I have allergies. You're not understanding me. She goes, well, it's very unusual for someone your age not to be on medication. I go, that's disgusting and weird. But no, I'm not interested in your statin appointment. No, thank you. Not going to do it. I still don't take statins. And of course, what I just found in this little clip, and you'll hear it tomorrow if you listen to the podcast, but for about 16 years, they had evidence that statins, in fact, didn't help. And not only that, but higher cholesterol levels in men were healthier and lower cholesterol levels after statins were leading to more and more deaths. There was a correlation, if not, it's probably not causation, but correlation with lowering cholesterol in men being a problem. And they suppressed the study for 16 years because there's a lot of money to be made in selling people a statin drug because it doesn't have a ton of downsides and it doesn't necessarily do anything to you. So everybody was getting it. My dad was on statins, and I talked him into taking them off. My dad's 75, and he doesn't take them anymore, and I'm really glad of it. I had to talk him. I said, I don't think it matters. I said, there's not a thing in our body that's not supposed to be there when you just eat regular food. And if the things you're eating are cheese and animal fats, this is not problematic. This is what our ancestors ate. So what are you talking about? It's crazy to me to think about that. But I also thought it was crazy that someone thought that in my 30s I should at least have some medications. They look at me weird when I go to the VA and I don't have any drugs on my daily list. They go, well, what are you prescribed? I go, nothing, because I don't ever come see you guys. Like I don't take any drugs. I feel fine. Yeah, I do some stretching.
Yeah, well, they tried giving me statins 30 years ago, and I turned them down because my kidneys started hurting. And so I said, no, joints. I started having joint pain. And come to find out, there's a woman out there. She's a doctor, 80 some years old. Mm-hmm. And she has made the point that statins were probably the main thing that caused COVID to be so dangerous.
How interesting.
Okay. Because by lowering cholesterol is a key component of our immune system. Mm-hmm. Okay. And having low cholesterol means you're less able to fight off viruses and bacteria infections. And she, at 80 some years old, had a cholesterol level. They don't want you above 200. Mm-hmm. Her cholesterol was 286. And she was quite content with her cholesterol level at 286, okay, at her age.
Yeah. Well, okay. I've even heard some things that said that the old formulas they used to use for this stuff, which is something that has gone out of vogue lately, because now they start telling, same thing with blood sugar. They'll look at blood sugar and they'll say, oh, you should be between 100 to 120. You shouldn't be over 120. And they said, no, it's essentially like your age plus 120 is probably a pretty safe number. because as you age, your blood sugar ends up going a little bit higher, and it's not that big of a deal. And at the end of the day, I think that we're treating numbers and we're treating symptoms, as you just said. We're not treating conditions, and we're certainly not treating the whole person. As somebody who worked in the emergency medical field, I don't care what your symptoms are. I'm worried about the whole person. I want to try to make sure that I get a package to a surgeon that's alive, and that means the entire thing has to be working. I don't just fix blood pressure by filling you full of liquid, because liquid is not the same thing as something that moves oxygen. So we gotta. There's a way to do it, and checklists are not it. And unfortunately, we're not creating critical thinkers and doctors. They're disincentivized to actually think through the problem, which is a shame because they go through an awful lot of schooling. And my friends that are doctors are bright guys. And they're just not leaned on that way.
Yeah, well, statin usage peaked in the United States in 2019.
Ain't that something, huh?
Yeah. I mean, like I say, the deeper I dig into this, the wilder it gets. So,
well,
it's nice to hear you.
I'll share this with you too. The last time I went into a doctor for an intake, which has probably been 8 years since I've done it, I haven't seen a doctor in a long time, and I don't really have any interest in going. We had a home birth from my last daughter. So 18 months ago, we had a baby in our last house. It was just me, a midwife, and my wife, just so, not that difficult to do. And she was fine, and she's never seen a doctor. She's just a little gem that runs around, blonde hair, blue-eyed, little wild animal. But they asked me if I had any medical conditions, and I said possibly immortal. And the lady called me back up to the desk, and she said, "What does this mean?" And I said, "Well, it's not confirmed, but I said it's possible that I'm immortal." And she said, "What is that? Why would you say that?" And I said, "Well, there's no evidence I'm not. I'm still here. I'm undefeated." And she said, "I don't think you're being very serious." And I said, "No, I'm not. Like, I don't really want to be here." But sometimes you got to screw with them a little bit.
Exactly. Well, like I say, I'm going to step aside here, see if there's anybody else that has, some conversation for you. I love talking to you, and I will do definitely sending you references. You were looking for references for lawsuits?
By all means, yeah. If you got them and you got them handy, put them onto the local site, because I go looking through them, and I'm gonna start compiling more. I'll send them over to my attorneys so we have references for them, and the more the merrier. Like the deeper the pool, the happier I am with it. I definitely would do that. And you'll find if you put some information that you're talking about, you stirred a lot of folks in our chat. I've left it on the screen up here just so people can read it while we're talking. And you've had a lot of secondary conversations that have opened up from the things you've discussed. So I think that was enjoyable. Some of these call-in shows end up just being like me and somebody else chatting, and everybody else gets to eavesdrop. And I think people like that. It's like listening to two guys sitting at a bar with everybody around you is just quiet, trying to figure out what they're talking about and have their sidebar conversations. So you were the guy for that today, Steve.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, I have spent, let's see, I did my first DC visit as a national protest. I was one of the original Tea Partiers.
Okay.
In 2009, September 12th, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
We had nearly 1 million people there. It made January 6th look like, it was minor.
Yep.
Okay. Number of people we had there. And I've got photographs of us overrunning the Capitol Police. Okay, because we were all elderly and they had blocked us. They had put up these plastic fences around the green area in front of the Capitol, and the stage for the event was up at the bottom of the Capitol steps.
Uh-huh.
And so my sister and I, 60s and 70s, literally we brought camping chairs. And so we just wanted to sit down and watch. And they weren't letting us onto the grassy area because they said it was a fire hazard and blah, 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 and,
Mm-hmm.
So they had, surrounding that grassy area, there's a low rock wall, maybe 3 feet tall, about waist high.
Yep.
And I've got pictures of elderly people scrambling over the rock wall with Capitol Police standing there trying to stop them, and they didn't go crazy like January 6th. And
Yeah.
I swear January 6th was not a Capitol Police thing. It was a Washington Metro DC police thing.
Well,
Okay.
I'll tell you this about Washington Metro PD, having worked in that area for 5 years and change. And when I had a buddy had a problem, I reached out to all my buddies. I said, hey, you guys work with DC Metro regularly? They said, yeah. I said, who do you have who's a gun contact over there? I could pick up the phone and call, so a lieutenant or maybe a captain or somebody that's a desk sergeant that's working a night. And they said, I called four or five guys, and they said, I don't know a single person there that's not too fat to take seriously or too corrupt to take your phone call. I went, well, that's pretty effed up. Like, we're in a bad space if we don't know a single person between us, because I didn't know anybody either. I went, okay, well, yeah, DC Metro is an animal that is ugly. I've done a lot of corruption investigations, and we used to follow around DC Metro PD guys from petty corruption on a regular basis, because it's not a good organization. And so that's not surprising to me to hear it.
Yeah, well, it's just like I say, it's DC National. The last 2 visits I've made to DC, I was literally either not allowed into DC or, was watched. And January 6th, okay, I mean, you know how that ended up.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was at the first 2 Tea Party, 2009 and 2010 protests. Those were several 100,000 people.
Yep.
January 6th. And then I went to Biden's inauguration. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I don't know. I was stationed in D.C. in 1969.
Okay.
I was in D.C. for Nixon's inauguration. I was told by the Navy, I was going to language school in D.C. I was told by the Navy not to go into D.C. I was ordered. I went anyway.
That was what, about a year after the big race riots there too?
Well, the whole thing is, this was, when Vietnam was in, I saw rocks and sticks thrown at the presidential limousine in the inaugural parade.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I actually witnessed it. When I went to D.C. in 2021, I lived in D.C. for a year and actually lived off base.
Yep.
Over in Arlington.
Okay. Yep.
And so I was right across Arlington Highway from the Iwo Jima Monument.
Mm-hmm.
Used to walk over there, and from the Iwo Jima Monument, you can see the Capitol building and the Washington Monument, and, you're looking basically right down the mall there. And so I went in there just to compare it to my 1969 experience. And when I got in there, first of all, you were not allowed into D.C. They had National Guard and police blocking every bridge into D.C. except the Key Bridge, because the Key Bridge did not go into D.C. It actually went into Georgetown.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And so the whole thing is, I went into Arlington Cemetery, and I actually got blocked in Arlington Cemetery for a while because they shut down Arlington Cemetery with National Guard and police.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what in the hell is going on here? And I come to find out what had happened was, first of all, the inauguration of Joe Biden was not an inauguration. It was the installation of a puppet president.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you shut down the citizens from coming to the Capitol, there were more police and National Guard in D.C. than were in the Green Zone in Iraq. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
I told people it looked like what I have to imagine the West Berlin, East Berlin divide looked like, because I was working out of the Washington field office for the Bureau in 2021, and I had a badge so I could get into work, and I had to go through 3 layers of National Guard troops, and I had to flash my lights to get on the bridge and get across into DC on any of the days I wanted to work before the inauguration. It was absolutely insane. And so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
I can picture all the fencing that was up. I can picture all the poor bastards that were all walking around with, rifles but no magazines in them, kind of thing. And the whole thing, it was theatrical and it was insane. But like I said, we've come a long ways over the last 4 or 5 years. It's been a real wild journey, and we can't forget it. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about COVID or the politics of it, or watching our government come out there and say that they don't have to let citizens come in and see people get sworn in, which is a pretty wild thing. So that's interesting that you had the same experience that I did there.
Yes, and the thing is that my last trip was part of the truckers convoy, the Freedom Convoy in 2022.
Uh-huh.
I was part of that for 10 days up in Hagerstown, Maryland. My first loop around D.C. with the truckers convoy was led by Ted Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
In a 1960s GMC tractor trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was the lead vehicle.
Okay.
And we just went around 495, way outside of DC.
Yep.
And the interesting thing is, in Maryland, you had very little presence, but every quarter to half mile in Virginia, state police along the road. Okay. We were troublemakers. And, talk about a peaceful protest. Of course, we had like 1,000 vehicles.
Yep.
And the second loop we did in D.C., we came in 495, and then we went across the bridge that runs past the Jefferson Memorial, 395, I think, runs across that. I forget what bridge that is.
That's the 14th Street Bridge.
Okay, we went across the 14th Street Bridge, and literally every exit there in the DC area was literally blocked off with garbage trucks or buses.
Yep.
Or, with National Guard and state police. And once again, I just couldn't believe it. I'm sitting here saying, Jesus Christ, I was an enlisted guy in the Navy in 1969. I used to go to the Library of Congress on weekends, read the newspaper just for the experience,
Yep. We lost a lot of things.
I'm not even allowed. I'm not even allowed into my country's capital to protest.
That's right.
I mean, this is bad news. So, anyways.
Well, I enjoyed the chat.
By the way,
go ahead.
I was called Stevie Wonder because working in naval intelligence, our security clearances were so high that most admirals in the Navy were not allowed in our spaces. Only in the intelligence-rated admirals were allowed, on our aircraft or on our ships or
Sure.
that kind of stuff in our spaces. And the whole thing is, I was called Stevie Wonder the Spook because the first mission I came down with, I did something that was against all the rules from my mentor, another E5. I was an E4 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was ranting and raving and cussing me out because I didn't send out a critic, which is an alert that goes straight to NSA and then the National Security Agency, and then from there to the president's national security advisor.
Uh-huh.
And basically, he was chewing me out for not sending out a critic for something I heard. And he had told me over and over, send out a critic if you ever hear this. And I said, well, will you listen? And I said, and basically, it's what you didn't hear that caused me not to send out the critic. I checked with my officer on the plane. We had no airstrikes going in to Vietnam that day because it was basically rained in.
Uh-huh.
And so I was listening to surface-to-air missile sites. And they were launching missiles, but there was no sound of the missiles leaving the pad.
Interesting.
Okay.
So they were what? They were just dummy launches?
They were practicing.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's when I became Stevie Wonder.
I think you should be telling people that it's because you're just you're a blind black guy and you just got, you know, kind of an extraordinary skill at playing the piano. You might as well just run with that too, because that'll really throw people off.
Well, the whole thing is I call myself Stevie Wonder the Spook because literally I was a member of the Big Look Spooks. So I was a spook and I was Stevie Wonder, and so
there it is.
It's a double entendre. You know, so I'm playing with people mentally.
I don't mind it. At some point, I will tell people why my call sign was Snake Nuts, and we'll have to.
It was what?
Snake Nuts.
Snake Nuts. Yeah.
That's another story.
Where are you now? Down in Florida?
No, I'm out of Texas. We're north of Austin.
Okay. All right. Outside of Boston, I'm sorry for you there.
I avoid the Austin part of it. I'm in the Texas part of it, so it's okay where we're at. When I had a fun, we were talking about swatting before we jumped on the line here. I had a conversation with my sheriff's department. I said, look, I got kind of a national profile. I talk to a lot of people. A lot of folks I talk to on a regular basis just got swatted in Texas. Can you put something in my file so you guys don't end up, if you get a call, that you don't show over to my house? And he goes, yeah. You just need to know who your audience is and know what's going on with them. And if you get angry stuff. And I said, sir, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to tell you. I used to be an FBI agent. I understand what the threat analysis is. I used to ride on an ambulance down in Travis County, and I know what that's all about too. And I've gotten the call, and I've done a response, and I've gone through the door when we thought there was, weapons of mass destruction, explosives, etc. I understand all of it. I don't want anyone freaking out if they get a phone call saying something crazy's happened at my house, and I'll tell you the address. And I did, I said, I just don't want anybody to get amped up, because if anybody comes to my house, I'll call you guys when it's quiet. I said, I got binocular night vision next to my bed. I got a suppressed 300 blackout with subsonics in it. And I'm confident that I'm home enough times. We got it under control. We'll call you calmly. You'll never hear me say that there's something crazy going on. We'll say that something crazy has already happened and come in. No need to put on the lights and sirens. And the guy goes, I don't know. So he gets off the line. And then I think he must have dropped my name into Google, because when he called me back, he goes, let's get your wife's phone number on here too. Let's go ahead and get this kind of squared away. We want to make sure. Yeah, it sounds like you probably could be on the list of people that get that phone call. So we have a decent group of people. We're more on the Texas side. The Austin people are south of us, and they're goofy. They've been goofy for a real long time. But we're more around the Texas American people.
When I came back after January 6th, the first place I went was my local sheriff.
Smart.
Okay.
Yep.
And I just told him, I said, look, I don't know what's going on here, but it's crazier than hell. And I'm going to tell you, I left D.C. before anything ever happened. And if, it was already out. And that they were going after every January 6th. And, that of course that's something else that's got to be, all these people need to be, given money for the lives they've lost. And I'm telling you, I'm glad to have you as a fellow warrior in the fight here. Okay.
No other choice.
And just want to let you know, this 78-year-old Vietnam veteran intelligence guy is dug in and, going to be fighting from the trenches here.
I love it. I appreciate it. I think if more people had that conviction, we wouldn't have gotten this country so sideways. But at least they know now. Hopefully they all take advantage of that second choice and that second chance. And I look forward to connecting you over on the local side too. Like I said, we'll try to get you in touch with Sonny, and that might be a value to you if you're doing some work with the VA at this point. Maybe we'll get that place cleaned up too.
Absolutely. I'm also doing work on election integrity.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm involved in that game also.
Yeah, there's no shortage of battles right now, are there?
No. It did literally. Oh, and by the way, I want to mention one thing.
Sure.
I no longer use the term liberal.
Yeah.
Now, to me, the term to use is progressives.
That's right.
Because my senior senator in Kentucky, I have personally shaken hands with Thomas Massey and with Rand Paul in town meetings, okay, and got them elected into their offices from the beginning. And in 40 years of living in Kentucky, 27 and 25. No, in 52 years of being in Kentucky,
Yep.
I have never seen Mitch McConnell in person.
Well,
And Mitch McConnell, to me, is the epitome of a progressive.
Yeah.
Believes in big government, okay, and self-interest rather than, Rand Paul and Thomas Massey. I'm not agreeing with all of them, but I was proud that Thomas and Rand Paul stood up against the latest continuing resolution. I'm worried that we're Trump got his victory mandated, and I'm worried that we're sliding away from taking advantage of that mandate. So, it's like you say, lots of battles being fought here, and I'm getting too old for this shit.
That's what I hear. Yeah. but that's what we need. We need retired people that don't get unplugged. My friends that are retired right now too. It's the same story. It's like, I'm sorry that you thought you were going to get a break. The country needs you to keep on it because you got the time and the wherewithal. So I appreciate it. I appreciate the call. You're a star, so saith our chat. So you're always welcome to call in on any of the Thursdays, and I look forward to talking to you in the near future on the next one.
Good talking to you.
All right, sir. Have a great night. How about that, y'all? We'll just have like a long form interview. I can go that day. I can listen all day long, and that was not nothing. Stevie Wonder the Spook, aka the blind piano player, previously out of Dan Nam. That's good times. I'll take that up. I think we're going to shut it down for the day. By the way, we're going to get kicked off. Locals only goes until it only gives us a 2-hour counter, so I don't want to get kicked off the line. And I appreciate the call. And sometimes we get a couple of calls, and sometimes we just chat for a long time on one because why not? Nobody else tried to take it over. So thanks for all of you tuning in. I'm looking forward. We're not going to have a regular Friendly Friday tomorrow. Let me go to my main screen here. We're not going to have a regular Friendly Friday. We're going to have a special Friendly Friday, and you guys will just have to tune in to see who's going to fill in and what happened to my friend Steve, because he might be busy. So we're going to be doing something else, right? And then in the meantime, let me leave you with one goofy song from that goofy little kid, just because I wanted to play it, and then we'll get out of here. Here's that Harry Sisson kid again. I don't know why I want to hear it again, but the text messages of Harry Sisson texting with little girls. Here you go.
Damn, you're sexy, like fuck you off to wine tasting, but that's just me. I think that's a great idea. God damn it, I never lied to you. We were not exclusive, and I made it abundantly clear. I didn't want that, and you said it was fine. I haven't done anything that wasn't allowed within the parameters. We said, why are you screenshotting? You're hot, feels pretty great, I can't lie. The verdict is you look sexy as fuck. Court adjourned. LMOC, your opinion is the only one that mattered. Got that ass is fat, looks amazing. And right now I can't do exclusivity, not because I'm getting new to a bunch of girls or fucking girls and stuff, because I just don't think I'd be able to commit 100% to something. Also, since we live in different states, exclusivity would be hard. So I'm not balancing a bunch of girls at once. My mind and energy are just other places right now, and I don't have much more to give. You're hot, feels pretty great, I can't lie. The verdict is you look sexy as fuck. Court adjourned. LMOC, your opinion is the only one that mattered. Got that ass is fat, looks amazing. Feels pretty great, I can't lie. The verdict is you look sexy as fuck. Court adjourned. LMOC, your opinion is the only one that mattered. Got
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.